Tonight we're visiting Mr. and Mrs. Lego in their lovely home in Suburbanville, California. Mrs. Lego is feeding baby Lego. Junior Lego has been grounded because he didn't do his homework, and so he's beating his head against the wall. Mr. Lego is having a drink of tea and playing with his daughter after a hard day at work. He's also sitting there looking at his utility bill, wondering why it's so much. I think we might have a hint here that maybe this is a pretty hard house to heat and cool. Now this is a bit extreme, but it turns out that many of the houses in California are not that different from Mr. and Mrs. Lego's house. And that's one of the reasons building performance is becoming the profession that it is. We need to fix these leakers. Now in this house, it's pretty easy to fix. And as we know, the loading order says fixing leaks, air leaks in homes is about the best thing we can do to save energy and improve comfort. So I'm going to show you how easy it is to air seal a house like this. All right. Already, Mr. and Mrs. Lego are feeling better. Now, unfortunately, their view's kind of cut off, but they'll take it on a cold winter's day or a hot summer's day. Now, even though we've gone a long ways toward making this a more comfortable and energy-efficient home, we're not really done. There's the second part of the building envelope, which we discussed earlier. That's the thermal envelope. So, nice thick insulation, air barrier on the outside, keeping in mind that the ideal situation for fiberglass insulation is to have an airtight barrier on all 6 edges. So, let's finish the job of improving Mr. and Mrs. Lego's building envelope. There, nice and snug. Few problems. It's going to get a little stuffy in there. You know, they're going to feel a little claustrophobic, so we're going to have to make some modifications. But the general principle of the building envelope, both the air envelope and the thermal envelope combined, is represented in Mr. and Mrs. Lego's house. I have another illustration to show you, and before we choke them to death, we'll let a little air in, because we haven't installed the mechanical ventilation system that's needed for a truly airtight building. Much of what we try to do in building performance is to move our homes closer to the refrigerator model and further away from the birdcage model. And that's done by improving the building envelope, which is the air envelope and the thermal envelope combined, as we discussed earlier. So why do I say we want to be more like a refrigerator? Well, first of all, they're remarkably airtight, and they're very well insulated. Now, refrigerator makers have an advantage over us home builders because they can mold one solid piece of plastic for the inside that has absolutely no holes in it. Same thing on the door. They have these wonderful magnetic strips that make a nice airtight seal. And when this refrigerator's closed, it's pretty well airtight. It's airtight to the point that if a person was living inside it, or in my youth, we used to hear stories of children who were locked inside refrigerators that still had the mechanical handles and actually suffocating to death. So as we move our homes closer to the refrigerator model, we always have to take into consideration ventilation. There are formulas that tell us how much air we need, whether it's natural, which means allowed a certain amount of leakage that's built in, and we can determine that with our blower door, or we have to install continuous mechanical ventilation. So improving the air envelope and improving the thermal envelope, it's very difficult to get it to the point where you require mechanical ventilation, but it can happen, and in a well-done house would happen. So just to show you a little further the importance of air sealing, I've modified this refrigerator a little bit. I drilled 2 7/8" holes in it, one high and one low. And for fun, I stuck my kilowatt meter on it and measured the electrical consumption for a week compared to without these 2 7/8" holes. The electrical consumption more than doubled, and I couldn't keep a frozen ice cream bar in this refrigerator. So more than doubled because of these 2 small holes. That's not that dissimilar from what happens in our home, especially when these holes are high and low. If I had drilled them in what we call the neutral plane, which is kind of on the same level, the effect, the energy waste would have been much reduced. This hole here allows hot air to come in and replace the cold air that's flowing out. It's heavy and it's sinking and it's pulling the warmed air behind it. So I'm going to air seal this refrigerator. And I wish it was this easy when we're doing houses. All right, we've pretty well restored this refrigerator to its theoretical optimal operating system. Now, if we were doing a really good job of air sealing this refrigerator, we would come in and we would replace the insulation that was removed, because insulation is important too. But in this particular case, air sealing is more important than insulation, and that's why in the loading order you will almost always see air sealing, air envelope sealing above thermal envelope repair and remediation. While I'm at it, I'll mention one other thing. A refrigerator is another version of what we call air conditioning when we put it in a house. This is the compressor. The compressor, when we're doing air conditioning, sits outside the house. It goes into when we're in the furnace box, the air handler is blowing air through a coil. But this panel right here, with small tubes in it to let the refrigerant flow through, is like the coil inside an air handler. So there's a lot to be learned from this little refrigerator.